hold on. Good evening. This is Dr. John Bennett on iHealth TV. Tonight we have the honor of having Jordan Gourmet. I'll get the pronunciation from Jordan, MD. He's a doctor from Chicago, and he wrote a book, I'm Your Doctor, and This Is My Humble Opinion. And we have a couple of distinguished members of the panel. First, we'll introduce them, and then we'll turn it over to Jordan. Good evening. Someone has their screen on. Okay, let me get that off here. Okay, a little temporary glitch. Okay, we're all set. Okay, John, welcome.
All right, hi. I'm a medical writer. I do a lot of hangouts here with John, so I'm just dropping in to see what's going on.
Very welcome, John. And Ben?
Ben, I'm a physician from Michigan, internal medicine, and also healthcare MBA. Followed by health information technology.
Very good. Welcome, Ben.
Yeah,
and Jordan, could you just give a brief introduction, please?
Hi there. My name is Jordan Grummett. I'm a general internal medicine physician. I actually run a home-based concierge practice as well as I do a bunch of nursing home work. I wrote a book called I Am Your Doctor and This Is My Humble Opinion. It's actually a book of curated blog posts. I've been blogging about medicine and life in general, probably since about 2005, 2006. I've probably written 650, 700 posts in all, and so this is a small grouping of those that I curated to kind of tell a story about my adventures through medicine and life.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, welcome, Jordan. You know, we had, I don't know, I think John was on the panel. We had Dr. Andrew Widner, who's a neurologist that did basically the same thing. He writes for Medscape. Bullets and Brains, a series of blogs from Medscape. And so let me start things off, Jordan. When were you always a writer? Did you start writing in high school and etc., or were you kind of a late starter?
I think I always wrote. I used to journal and write a lot of poetry, and it's a kind of funny story of how I started blogging on the internet. When I was first practicing and I was in my younger years, I actually owned a business that sold artwork, and so I was buying and selling artwork on the internet, and I built a website in order to support that business. And at that time, my brother Andrew was experimenting with blogging, and he said, you know, if you're going to have a website and you really want people to come to your website, you have to create content that changes. So I started blogging about artwork, and I had been doing that for a number of months, and frankly, I was kind of bored, because I liked to buy and sell the artwork, but the passion wasn't there. And so one day I put into my Google browser, you know, medical blogs. Now again, this was back in 2005 or so. And I came across a guy named Grunt Doc. He's an ER physician, a very prolific blogger. And I read his stuff, and I knew immediately that what I wanted to be doing is writing about medicine. So I remember that day I set out to write my first blog post that wasn't about artwork, it wasn't about selling artwork, it was about medicine. And I wrote kind of the story of my life in a series of posts about how my father was a physician and he died when I was very, very young. He died suddenly, and that propelled me into this idea that I would become a physician too. And I wrote about how that experienced me and got me pretty much to residency, where I had kind of a life-changing experience with a patient that died, and how that jaded me to medicine in general. And that how writing reawoken some of my passion and love for it and opened me back up to caring for patients.
You know, I just read your blog today. I haven't read all your book or all your blogs, but I read a blog about your chief resident. The day that your chief resident, and you probably still remember that. It's pretty touching. And you gave a talk on that in Ireland.
Yeah, I did. I was at the .med conference. So I love to write about medicine. I love to tell stories about medicine. And it's quite enjoyable not just to write about them, but also to get up in front of people and narrate and tell stories. So it's something I enjoy quite a bit of. The story that John was referring to was called The Day Medicine Broke My Chief. And it was a story about how one of my chief residents and I got a call to go see a pregnant lady in the emergency room, and how that lady as well as her child died. And I said that was the day that broke my chief, because it was such an experience that it changed us both forever.
Yeah, you know, I think every doctor could, I'm sure Ben could probably tell you a story too about a couple of cases that really goes deeply into every doctor. you get kind of tied up. Now, obviously, you're a writer. You must be a big reader. Who are your favorite authors, and are they medical writers or just any author in general that you really like?
So, you know, believe it or not, I do a lot less reading than I used to. I remember as a younger man, I really loved to read like Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, and some of that, like that really just amazed me when I first read it. Lately, because I've been writing about medicine, I've also been reading about medicine. So recently read Danielle Offrey, who's very good. Stephen Schimpf just came out with a book called Fixing Primary Care, which is really, really good. I like Louise Aronson quite a bit. She wrote a book called A History of the Present Illness. I've read some Atul Gawande here and there, but I haven't read Being Mortal yet. But I've been working on reading a number of those authors and enjoying them quite a bit.
I didn't realize that Chekhov was a doctor. Anton Chekhov, and there's a couple other guys, Dr. Williams, I forget his first name.
William Carlos Williams?
Yeah, William Carlos Williams. Well, his first name was William. He was a writer, and there's some other doctors. Which of the present doctors today do you like to read? Do you have any doctors today that write? Well,
some of those that I just mentioned. So Louise Aronson is a geriatrician out of San Francisco. Danielle Offrey is an internist and a geriatrician out of New York.
Okay.
Sandeep Jawar just wrote a book called Doctored, which has gotten a lot of press too. So there's a lot of modern day writers out there, and some of them are just bloggers who haven't written a book yet. A guy named Greg Smith, who's a psychiatrist who I read all the time.
Yeah.
There's some really great writers out there.
Yeah, there are. John, since you're a medical writer, which other writers do you like out there?
What's that, John?
Which of the writers do you like to read out there? Is it all, or is it mostly scientific?
Well, I mean, mostly science and technology. There's not really a whole lot of medical writers per se that just write about diseases.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, all the popular science.
Okay.
Technology journals, MIT Tech Review, Wired. They cover the more popular stories.
Okay, no particular author that you really, when you see him writing, I got to read that.
No, I don't have any.
No particular. I caught you, John.
Yeah.
How about you, Ben?
I'm not a big time medical reader, but I used to read Robin Cook. Previously, he's a medical writer.
Of course.
I mean, it'd be exciting, but after that, I mean, I've not really read anybody's novels.
Yeah, I'm sure you know his story, Jordan. He was actually he started writing in medical school, right?
Yeah, I think he.
Yeah, and he actually.
You mean Robin Cook?
Yeah, and he actually supported himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I think he was an ophthalmologist, and he quit just to write.
Right.
I don't know if he ever finished his residency, but I think he started as an ophthalmologist.
A great guy.
What you're seeing now is there are a lot of people out there starting to write about the medical narrative. So we have a lot of people out there who are telling both doctor and patient stories. And I think it's really catching on. You see a lot of it in social media. There's some people out there. There's a guy named Jay Baruch who's out there too. He just came out with a book called, I think, What's Left Behind. I ordered it, haven't received it yet. But there's a lot of practicing docs now out there who are starting to tell the narratives of what's happening in the doctor-patient relationship. I think it's real important. As I've said kind of multiple times in the past in my blog, with healthcare reform going the way it is and the way the public looks at physicians, I think we really do have to tell our stories because we need our patients to identify with us. We need them to be on our side because as time goes on, we're becoming more and more cost-conscious, and healthcare reform is getting more and more restrictive. And I think we're going to need each other's help to protect the interests of your common person.
Right. Now, it's a very unusual time in history where you get to see the personal side of the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, one guy I follow, not necessarily the patient-doctor relationship, but more the patient-medical device company, is Hugo Campos. He's got a Medtronic pacemaker, and as you mentioned, social media, he's always on there talking about trying to get access to his own data.
Yeah, the e-patient, so he's one of the group of e-patients. There's a number of them out there who are more prominent. In fact, he just tweeted today about, I think LabCorp was saying that they were going to allow patients to request their own blood tests without a doctor's order. And there are a number of people out there telling their stories, and I think it behooves us to tell our stories and to align with these people, because I think what we all want is more open, high-quality healthcare. And I think we can work together, but you know, one of my theories is that there's a real intimacy gap between doctors and patients. Patients walk into our offices and tell us the most intimate secrets, embarrassing facts. They tell us all about what's going on with them. And up until this time in history, mostly the doctor has kind of sat there very objectively and kind of said nothing. Now, that doesn't mean I think that doctors need to tell patients in their office about how their mom's sick and their wife is angry at them. I think that goes a little too far, but I think in more general terms, like I try to do with my book, I think we need to let patients generally know about our stories too. I think we need to bridge that gap and work together.
What specifically, Jordan, do you think patients need to know about doctors in general?
Well, you know, I think that doctors are a lot more human than most patients realize until they get to know them, and I think it's really sad, I think, that patients don't realize that doctors suffer too. So patients know that they get sick, they get ill, their families get ill, and they suffer, and they tend to only see their side of the suffering. I think we could have much better relationships if patients knew more on a general level, not necessarily always case by case, that doctors suffer through these things too. We mourn when we lose patients. We wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat worrying about them. We may have an emotionless face when we're sitting in the ER listening to them or rushing them off to surgery, because that's what we require to do what's best for them. But that doesn't mean these things don't affect us. And I think when patients and doctors see each other as full of emotion and real life and understanding and empathetic, I think we'll have stronger relationships. I think we'll have more healing relationships.
Do you think? Do you guys have a question, Ben or John?
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely right, Jordan. Because you know, if we can tell about our problems, like, you know, in general, like our restrictions, our, you know, hard work, and, you know, our patience and our tolerance, and you know, extends hours, you know, thinking about them, worrying about them, you know. If they know about that, I mean, we could heal this relationship. Otherwise, it's totally becoming like a business now. You know, I mean, patients, they don't even care. You know, that the respect is gone, and that, you know, the trust is gone. You know, they're just thinking the doctors are just business guys. You know, they just wanna, you know, do their thing and just go, and you know, they don't care, that kind of thing.
There are a lot of
yeah.
There are a lot of outside forces pushing in on the doctor-patient relationship.
Mm-hmm.
There's meaningful use. There's
Right.
the government. There are the time restrictions. There are a number of patients we need to see to keep our
Right.
doors open because overhead is increasing. If we don't start making these bonds with our patients so that they can see through all these outside forces, we're going to find ourselves lost. And I think
That's
in
right.
some ways we already have. I mean, patients are going to minute clinics in the CVS.
Right.
They're losing faith in who we are, and I don't think it's because we're necessarily doing something wrong. I think it's because we're not speaking up.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so
I mean, it's just like, you know, you have to see the patient within 20 minutes, a short case.
yeah.
I mean, you know, sometimes it might go beyond 20 minutes. I mean, you know, you just can't just stop there. You know, it's like so mechanical, you know, that way if we stop, you know, that really hurts the physician-patient relationship.
Yeah, that brings up a question. That kind of joins with my question, Jordan. Is it the time constraint? Do you think that's affecting greatly the relationship of the patient-doctor?
You know, I think it's a little bit of everything. The time constraint certainly does. The good doctors I know in 10 or 20 minutes can at least make that connection with patients. They can't always solve all their problems. But when you take the time constraints and you add it into the requirements of the computer, and you add it into the fact that patients are feeling like their insurances are shortchanging them and they don't have enough money or time to pay for care, and when you add it into the long waits to get in to see other doctors, and when you add it into our politicians saying that doctors are being wasteful and are ordering extra tests to pad their pocketbooks as opposed to take good care of patients. When you throw that all in together, we are just being attacked from all sides. And I understand why, and it makes sense, and we obviously have a healthcare system that needs a lot of help. But unless we form those bonds, unless our patients know who we are, we're not going to be allies. And I think we need them and they need us.
Okay. Do you think the EMR is helping the doctor-patient relationship or hurting?
Oh, I clearly think it's hurting. I've been using electronic medical records since 2003, so I'm a very early adopter. I currently use Epic all the time. I use Practice Fusion all the time. I use Cerner all the time, and I've also been on Allscripts for years. So I am a guy, and I'm very efficient. I can sit and type and talk to a patient, see them in 15 minutes, get everything into my note, and still most of the time my patients feel like I'm listening and paying attention. Okay. But I'll tell you, when I talk about medicine, a lot of my blogs you'll see this, I believe that medicine, when done correctly, it's an act of mastery, right? So it's like conducting an orchestra. Every little piece has to be in the right place if you want to understand the nuance. And when we take care of patients, it's like playing an instrument, and you have to have every moment and thought focused on playing that instrument correctly, or you don't do very well. Okay. So dealing with an EMR, dealing with our time constraints, it's like trying to conduct an orchestra and having someone in the audience throwing a water balloon at you. Okay. There's just way too much going on, and it's messing with our sense of mastery. I think if you become a master physician, a master clinician, you've been practicing your art for all these years, you've developed a certain level of mastery, and we have to stop getting in the way of telling masters how to do what they do best. We have to leave space for that mastery so that they can conduct their choir, they can conduct their orchestra correctly.
And you think writing is more conducive to that mastery than a computer?
In this case, so it's not just the computer. You know, if it was just I need to type in a few words, no big deal. It's actually not just the typing, but then it's the meaningful use and clicking all the clicks and checking all the boxes. So I think for the vast majority of us, we probably can pay attention better when we write. And for the vast majority of us, we formed this mastery over years and years of practice, and most of the time we were writing. So I'm not a Luddite. I think that electronic medical records are here to stay, and I think we need them because of the massive amount of data we have. But I think we have to be very careful in how we tell other people to use their electronic medical records. I think we need to, instead of using, what happens right now is that computers actually change the doctor-patient interaction. I used to start each visit in a certain order, but now I actually don't use that order anymore because to put it in the electronic medical record correctly, I've got to go through in a completely different order to get it in right. In a sense, that's the definition of changing mastery. It's taking people who know what they do and have taken years to learn what they do right and then asking them to change it all up.
You know, that's what Don Volt says of, I don't know if you saw the Hangout with him, of an anesthesiologist from Canton. He says basically it's an inefficient history taker. Now, if you had to design an EMR today, Jordan, how would you design it? What would you change in a design of the EMR?
You know what, I'm efficient enough that I can work around any EMR. What I would do is get rid of meaningful use. Okay. I think I don't have a problem getting everything into the EMR. I can figure that out. Okay. What it is it's all this extra stuff that takes us out of our normal workflow, which I think almost any practicing physician will tell you has no actual clinical benefit. Okay. I think it's just a waste of time.
That's going to end in a year or two, is it not? The meaningful use, or is that
meaningful use will end, but the quality indicators and the processes the government are going to put in place are going to remain. So even if they don't call it meaningful use, we will have a variable scaled pay based on what type of information we report and how we report it. So they may not call it meaningful use anymore, but you're still going to be graded on putting information in the computer in a certain way.
Oh, okay. Any remarks, John or Ben?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, as far as your medical records, I mean, every state, it looks like, is different as far as who owns the record. You know, very few, if any states, the patient actually owns the record. It's the hospital or doctors. And where is that going to fit into electronic medical records? You know, who owns the actual CT scans and prescription information, stuff like that?
You know, I think that right now it is true. The patient only owns what they actually go and get. Part of the thing that I think people don't realize is that medical records were never meant to be for patients to look at. They were meant for doctors to keep track of what they were doing and communicate with one another. So the problem with most medical records is they're pretty unreadable to patients, or they don't make a lot of sense. I think patients should have access to whatever they want access to. They can have, you know, every time my patient goes to get a CAT scan, they get a copy of that CAT scan on a disc and they can take it with them. I think patients should certainly be able to own all their data, and if they want to own all my notes, etc., I think it's fine. I will tell you that most of the time, what's written in my notes, it's like another language to them, so I don't know if they 100% understand it. Certainly in the times my patients have had open access to my notes, sometimes I find myself on many, many phone conversations talking about things that aren't really of relevance, that they don't necessarily understand. But I'm okay with that. I would rather, if that's what they want, this is their information. I do think it's nice as a physician, though, to have a private record that you can keep, that you use information that helps you remember and understand and helps other doctors remember and understand, and doesn't necessarily made for patients to understand their diseases. But you know, that's not something I feel so passionately about that I would fight to protect.
Every doctor has a story about a patient grabbing a chart and seeing that you've written that they're a son of a bitch. When you're saying short of breath.
Yes.
Why'd you call me that?
Yeah, certainly the way we write and what we write about it really is a different language.
Yeah.
And the way we write in our charts is not really written in a way that's meant for patient viewing. If it was, we would explain a lot more, and we would use a lot less shorthand, and we use a lot less medical terms. Mostly the chart is to really remind you and to communicate with other doctors.
Have you ever used Google Glass? Have you tried that, Jordan?
I have not. I was never a huge fan of the idea because I just didn't see what it added. I think some people do like it and feel that it's, you know, could be used in the operating room or what have you. Again, I'm not a Luddite when it comes to technology, but I certainly am more interested in technologies that not necessarily look cool, but that help me do something better or faster.
Yes, there's a group in California that uses it for regular office visits, and they claim that it speeds up the interview and lets them look more at the patient. It does look a little goofy, I know, but they claim that it makes them more efficient and saves them time. The principal group, I believe, in San Francisco. But obviously it's not in wide use in regular office practice. But anyways, so what do you foresee happening in the future? Do you think the doctors need to get more actively involved in what's happening, or do you see most of the doctors kind of going, oh, I don't really care what happens, whatever the government wants to do? Do you see a more of an apathy of doctors, what's going on, or?
I think I see what I see and what I write about a lot in my blog is I see a lot of helplessness in doctors, and I don't blame us as a group. I think we spend so much time and energy trying to take good care of our patients that it's also hard to learn how to be an advocate and decide how to fix the healthcare system. I think if we as physicians want to change things, we have to find a way to get together as a large group and advocate for ourselves. I don't know if I see that happening. Certainly the AMA and the ACP and none of those groups, I think, really are effective in advocating for the average physician on the ground. What I see, or what I suspect over the next decade or two, will be a marginalization of the physician as the caregiver. I think we're going to find that as much care as possible is going to go into less skilled hands. I think physicians will probably be paid less and looked at a little bit more as technicians, with the exception probably of some of the specialists and some of the surgeons. I suspect that's what's going to happen. I certainly would not be surprised. I think that's where things are going. I think if we want to stop that as physicians, we have to find a way to collectively get together and put our foot down and say what we believe in. I don't see that happening now, but it could.
Okay, yeah, certainly with the internet, that would seem to be a tool that could potentially get doctors together?
You know what the problem is, and this is always the issue, is, doctors, unlike lawyers or accountants or other groups, it's really hard to get 10 doctors in a room and get them to agree on anything.
Right.
So, it's hard to get a large group of physicians together enough to actually advocate for themselves. And I think that's always been the big problem. For instance, we are seeing some advocacy now. The American Board of Internal Medicine and their maintenance certification program for general internists, the testing they're now requiring of us to maintain our certification is getting onerous, and you've seen a flurry over the internet of people creating content against what the American Board of Internal Medicine has done. In fact, the American Board of Internal Medicine actually wrote an apology about how they changed the maintenance of certification. So we do have some advocacy, and there is some coming together. But it's very hard. It's very hard to kind of find a common platform which everyone believes in, and then to stand up for ourselves. We were taught in medical school and in residency to be selfless, and so it's hard to take a bunch of people who had it so deeply ingrained in themselves to be selfless, to do whatever it takes for the patient, and then convince them to start thinking about themselves as a group.
Yeah, and I guess as you alluded to, the AMA is kind of outdated, and they really don't actively participate in the daily practitioner's job.
Yeah, and most docs don't believe in the AMA. I mean, yeah. The AMA is part of the crew that was in favor of the Accountable Care Act. The AMA has a lot to do with the ICD codes. The AMA has a lot to do with the relative value units that have to do with how different doctors get paid. Most physicians on a granular level actually suspect that the AMA really has its own interests at hand and not that of its physicians.
If you had your choice, would you just write?
I don't know if I could just write. One of the things about it is that being a physician creates amazing things to write about. I mean, in what other field are you able to get an open-eyed view of some of the most desperate as well as enlightening parts of the human existence? But I do have to say, I think at this point in my career, I wake up having dreams about being a great writer. I don't necessarily wake up anymore about dreams being a great physician.
Well, I almost feel the same about being a physician in the internet age. I'm tremendously excited, and I don't think I'd be excited unless I had a knowledge of medicine. And I can go into many, like for example, talking to you tonight. We use this technology to be able to reach out to people we would not have met before, or even seen before. So it allows us to go into areas, as well as the new developing sciences, genomics, nanomedicine, the 3D printing, all these new things that are happening. In that respect, I think medicine is kind of a golden age. I'm sure after talking to you, it's not the golden age of daily medical practice, but as far as the dynamism and the changing things that are happening, which I wouldn't have been privy to unless I had a background in medicine.
I think the internet, especially Twitter and Facebook, etc., they're great amplifiers. So we now have all these content creators, these people who are writing, who are opining on the newest technologies, and who are creating these technologies, who all of a sudden have a medium to amplify their information. And we, the audience, are aggregators, right? So we find ways of following those smart people and friending those people who come up with the really good information, and we kind of cull it all together and we learn. So it's a really magical time of wading through all that information out there and finding ways to put it together in a way that makes the world make sense for us. And that's kind of, without the internet, without Twitter, without Facebook, my writing would probably be hidden away somewhere in a little notebook, and I wouldn't be able to get it out. But now I have people who, have experienced my words and stories, and it has affected them. And I don't think I would have that. Back in residency, maybe I'd write a poem and I'd submit it and it'd get accepted to a journal somewhere, and maybe a few people would see it. But now in the internet age, I can take my signal, I can amplify it, and other people hear it.
Yeah, and a lot of self-publishing now too, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a golden age of self-publishing. Many people start, even like me, they self-publish their book, and it's only later that sometimes they get it picked up by a publisher, but some would argue, why bother with a publisher, because they're going to make you market your book yourself, and then you're just going to get less of a royalty.
Is this book self-published, or do you have a publisher?
This book is self-published.
Okay, and you hope it's picked up by a publisher?
Part of the process, so when I put the book together, I put a brochure and pack it together to actually send to publishers, but part of nowadays when you actually submit to a publisher, they want a whole marketing campaign and see how you're going to market the book. They don't really market it for you anymore.
Okay.
But nowadays, a lot of publishers want you to self-publish first if you're not a known entity, and they want to see your sales and how well you do before they even consider it. As my book gets more successful and I'm selling more and more, I don't know whether I'll go the traditional publishing route, assuming I could find someone who's interested in it, or whether I should just keep doing what I'm doing.
Do you go to conventions to talk about your book, or where do you go? What do you do to promote your book now?
So right now there's a number of things. So I have a Facebook author page. I have my normal Facebook page. I have a Facebook book page. I've been using LinkedIn quite a bit and getting on the groups there, as well as Twitter. I have a number of events. So among the other things I do, I also work in hospice and palliative care. So I'm giving a book reading at a local bookstore on Thursday. I'm signed up to give talks to a number of senior centers as well as to some hospices. Now that's very local, and it's a good way to kind of develop my speaking style as well as get used to talking about the book. You're not going to sell a huge number of books that way, maybe 20 or 30, but the idea is to get the word out and have people start reading the book and rating it and putting reviews on Amazon. So it's all part of kind of a big pattern of putting things together. Google Hangouts actually are very helpful, and I have a few of those set up. I have some radio interviews, but most of it's been self-generated press. I've been lucky enough that MedPage Today put out an article about me, so that was nice. I was invited to HIMSS, that's a health information technology get-together that was in Chicago a few weeks ago, and I went to a few meetings there and gave away some books. And so, there's different ways you can do it, and the key, though, is to have people hear about it and have people see the book and look it up and talk and, tweet about it and et cetera, and eventually it catches on.
Well, when you're giving a reading to the lay public, what kind of questions are they asking?
Well, people ask all sorts of things. Sometimes they ask specific questions about the stories, but one thing I learn about talking about our stories to patients is the most common thing they say is, I had no idea my doctor thought about those kind of things.
Okay.
So mostly it's more that when they think about their own experiences, most of the time, again, they think about what it means to them, and that's very natural. You have a family member who's sick, or you're sick yourself, you're worried about how you feel. Sometimes when they're not in that acute situation and they can look out and say, wow, I was feeling this way, but I had no idea my doctor was thinking about these things. It really opens people's eyes, and again, this is those common bonds I think we need to form with our patient population in general.
I'm hogging all the questions here. Ben and John, do you have a question?
I'm just wondering, I didn't check out your book yet. I watched your YouTube video, but would you recommend starting out on Amazon or Google Books, or how do you get started if you do have a book that you've written?
You are on Amazon now.
Yeah, so if you want to self-publish, there are a number of self-publishing platforms. I used Amazon's. It's called CreateSpace. It's fairly easy. I actually did hire an editor, so she and I went through, so I had about 700 posts. So she and I went through the posts. We picked out the ones we wanted to put together. She completely edited them, just got rid of my spelling errors, those kind of things. And she had a lot of experience. She's a book coach, so she has a lot of experience. So she helped me put it in the template. And it's really a process that once you have, the hardest part is having the content and putting it together well. Once you do that, you put it into the template. You have to read it a few times, make sure it's laid out well. And then you got to pick a cover. It's really fairly straightforward.
Are there any areas where you won't go in medicine where you just, because I notice when I talk to some doctor writers, they're sensitive about certain topics, and they want to avoid, well, prosecution or litigation or whatever, or privacy, security. Are there any areas that you particularly don't want to go to?
I'm not so sensitive. In fact, I'm going to be giving I'm going to be giving a book reading on Thursday, and I'm going to tell a story during it about something that, you know, now I look back on it had some mixed ethics to it. So it doesn't necessarily put me in the best light, but I don't worry so much about that stuff. What I do worry about is using identifying information, which people can look and see themselves in a story. Okay. So most of the things I write are radically changed. What I like to do is I fictionalized many, many things. And I try to keep the ideas the same, and sometimes I have mixed stories of 3 or 4 different people to come up with one piece, because I really want to try to make it non-identifiable to whoever it's about. I also like to write about, so I do that, and then I also write about people who died a long time ago. That helps.
Oh, right. Dead man can't sue. You know, yeah, I think that applies to a lot of areas of writing. You don't want to identify anybody, not just healthcare, but any types of writing, because of obvious problems. But I do notice, I don't know if you've noticed it too, when I do hangouts with doctors, some doctors are, actually some are afraid to come on the screen to say too much. They're afraid that people will construe it the wrong way, or they're maybe making a mistake or something. For example, I asked a doctor to comment on the EMR, how I think it's pretty, you know, useless because it's not interoperative, and he just did not want to comment, didn't want to get involved, because I think he felt he was going to get harmed professionally by going out and speaking his mind.
You know what I found? The worst thing you can have is a very small social media footprint. And the reason why is the minute something comes out, it's going to be amplified because it's the only thing out there. In other words, if you have no social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, no blog, and there's a patient rating site and 1 or 2 people didn't like you, when someone searches on your name, the first thing they're going to come is that patient rating site and see all sorts of bad things on you. Right. On the other hand, if you're like me and you have blogging and writing in all sorts of places, and you have some video out there, and you have your own self-created content, all of a sudden the doctor rating sites come up 5th, 6th, 7th page on Google because there's so much out there. So a very wise man, and I don't know if this is his quote, but he told me when we were in Ireland at this .NET conference, his name is Brian Vartabedian, really, really smart guy. He said the solution to pollution is dilution. In other words, create your own internet social media content, get out there, put out there what you want about you said, and don't worry about whatever anyone else is saying about you. So if you look and you Google my name, you're going to find a lot of self-created content. They're my blogs, they're my LinkedIn page, they're my posts that ended up on Kevin MD. It's my stuff. Right. If it turns out bad, I was the one who messed it up. It wasn't going to be someone else.
Right.
That's wonderful.
I could have laughed at a Ben.
Yep, that's really good. That's a good thing. I mean, that's a nice saying.
The solution to pollution
of pollution.
Is dilution.
Yeah.
Brian Vartabedian. He's a GI guy from Texas, right?
Yeah, incredibly, incredibly smart guy. I've been lucky enough to be at some conferences with him, and he's just as smart in person as he is in all of his blog posts on 33 Charts. Really great guy, worth following.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, 33 Charts. That's the name of the blog, John. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I haven't read a lot of it, but I've certainly have seen his name all around the net. He's a pretty prominent, like Kevin MD. He's a pretty prominent blogger. Yeah, have you seen him, John?
I have. Yeah.
33 Charts. And
yeah, I've also seen 33 Squared.
Okay, is that a healthcare blog?
Yeah, healthcare, but it's more futurism, you know, like future healthcare.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. Well,
Jordan, I have a question before
go ahead. Sure.
I'm just wondering, did you talk to AMA, because that's supposedly that's the thing for physicians? Did you talk about this healing of physician-patient relationship through your My Opinion book? You know, so that they could advocate or, you know, help you get this book out?
I haven't. At this point, I have no connection with AMA.
I don't think that would help you.
Yeah. The other thing about the book. The other thing about the book is there's some controversy in the sense that I also talk about going from a traditional practice to a concierge practice in a number of my posts. So people like the AMA, some of the medical schools may not want to advocate for this book as much, only because I talk about real-life practicing medicine, and some of that, you know, I made the decision at least to leave a 2,000 patient practice to do a home-based concierge practice of about 100, 150 people on top of doing my nursing homework. So, you know, some of that is controversial.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, very good. I'd like to thank you a lot, Jordan, for coming out, and I hope you use this as in your portfolio of reference videos. And,
Yeah, I will, and you should do a shout out to Mike Sevilla, because I just saw on Twitter that he was watching us. So.
oh, fantastic! Say hi to Mike. Maybe we'll get lucky to be on his show someday if we do the right thing. And thank you, Ben, and thank you, John.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you, Jordan. I'll send you
Good
a
luck
link.
with your book.